Let's find out how bad this rust problem really is on my E350. The only way to figure it out is to cut it out. This is my 2013 Ford E350 van that I use to travel the country and take my kids camping. This van has been pretty well taken care of its whole life. It wasn't really a daily driver at all, so I was pretty surprised when I had to remove the rear carpet to clean up a spill and found 2 large rust spots where the rear seat bolts down. Living in the Northeast, I'm no stranger to rust. I was just hoping I had a few more years before I needed to deal with it on this van. When facing problems like this, I normally like to start out with a scraper or a chisel and just sort of poke around to see what I'm dealing with. So here you can see that large pieces of rust are already starting to flake up, and really just the paint is holding this together on the top. One of my preferred tools here is the angle grinder with a slitting wheel on it. That allows me to come in and just cut that top layer of sheet metal. The goal here is to slowly figure out how far the rust goes and minimize the size of the hole that I need for the repair. This area of the van is where the rear seat bolts to the floor. It needs to support the weight of up to 4 adults in that seat, so Ford came up with a nice heavy-duty cross member. It's about 1/4 inch thick to be able to handle all that stress. The sheet metal that we're seeing here that's all rusted was just laminated on top of that and spot welded. Once water splashes up on the floor and gets between this heavy-duty cross member and the thin sheet metal, eventually it wore through the paint, and at that point the rust just took over. If you have an Econoline, I would definitely check this area. My van was never really driven very much in the winter, and it wasn't a daily driver, so there's no other rust on this van, certainly not as bad as this area, so it really caught me off guard to see that the rust had progressed this far this quickly. At this point of the repair, the upper sheet metal is back to full thickness, and I'm starting to see paint return on the lower cross member, so I don't really want to go any farther. I'm going to switch up to a wire wheel and try to remove as much of the rust and scale off the lower cross member as possible. This step is in preparation for a rust converter from Eastwood that we'll apply later. After the rust converter cures, we'll put a weld-through primer on both a sheet metal patch and this cross member, and then it'll get fully MIG welded up along the seams. Could be pretty seamless when we're done. With the driver's side all cleaned up, I'm nervously moving over to the passenger side. From the top, this side looked a lot worse. There was a lot more rust visible. The sheet metal had big waves in it from the rust expanding. And as we cut into here, you can see, as I had feared, there's a ton of rust stuck in between the sheet metal and the cross member. It really flakes up, and obviously you should not be able to pull up your floor by hand like this. If the lower cross member weren't that full 1/4 inch thick, I think that we would be in pretty bad shape, and I'd be replacing the lower cross member as well. But since it did have that extra thickness, there's still a lot of metal left. Extra note here, I never use the rear seat in this van. This is where all the cargo when we go camping is. So, I'm not really worried about it from a safety concern at this point. I know at some point rust is going to be what kills this van, but the van's taken my family all up and down the East Coast, and we've got a lot of great memories in it, and we've also got some plans to head out west. So I'd like to keep this thing going as long as I can. If you like the Econoline, they don't really make anything quite like it. They have the Transit, but that's kind of a whole different deal. So once this van's done, I'm not really sure what I'll do next for our next adventure vehicle. After some more cutting and grinding, you can see that this hole ended up being a little bit bigger than what was on the driver's side, but not too much worse. There are 2 areas on this side where the sheet metal's not flat, so we'll have to deal with that in the patch panel to make sure that it looks pretty good when we're all done. Up next, this is that Eastwood product I was talking about. It's a rust converter. I used it a lot on restoring my Jeep XJ. And this just brushes on. It's probably a little bit cold here today for this, but I don't think it'll hurt. So this will chemically convert the rust, keep it stable for when we put that weld-through primer on. I want to get this done soon so I can get back to my original project of making a fridge slide-out and kitchen slide-out for our cargo organizer. Make traveling a lot easier. That's about all I have time for today. Thanks for watching.